It's time for the Point Forward podcast, Milwaukee Bucks chatter from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. My name is J.R. Radcliffe. I am joined by my colleague, Jim Ozarski. He is the Bucks reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. I am a little under the weather, I will confess. My voice still not quite right. It's going on like 5 days. Jim, I think I might actually have to go to the doctor at some point because it is not going away, but that's just how it goes for me right now. I want to hear though from you. We are going to talk a lot today about Giannis Antetokounmpo. We often, I think, take him a little bit for granted, in these podcast sessions because he's awesome all the time, and we sort of look at the other aspects of the Milwaukee Bucks. But big night for him Wednesday against the Dallas Mavericks, a very depleted Dallas Mavericks team. Bucks won their fourth game in a row, and he cleared the 20,000-point mark. He joins 51 other players in NBA history to achieve that mark. I'm going to start there. There's a lot of Giannis that we're going to dive into. Start there with just how the team is doing it and how that 20,000 mark, how that resonates for Giannis specifically. I do think the Bucks, obviously they're playing quite well. It seems like things are really clicking for them. What are the vibes at for that? Because they are still just narrowly ahead of Indiana for that number 4 spot. Couple opportunities head to head with the Pacers. I think the Bucks are in a good place, right? I think that they've kind of solidified into they're definitely going to be one of those top 5-6 teams, and they could be pretty comfortable going forward here.
Yeah. I mean, it's 8 of 9 they've won, dating back to the first game before the All-Star break. And they've needed to do that, to be quite honest. I mean, this stretch of games, probably the toughest team they played was at Houston. No, I take it back. The best win of the season, home against Denver. On February 27th. I know Doc Rivers wanted to push back on me on that one, but technically speaking, the NBA Cup championship does not count for any regular season standings. So that was their best regular season win. Kind of a mid-90s clunker loss in Houston, lose by 3 to the Rockets, good playoff team. But look, they've played, Washington, Dallas twice, Atlanta. They're winning some games they should win here. Minnesota, good win on the road without Giannis and Dame back on February 12th. Which they need to do, honestly, JR, because they're scheduled the rest of March after this Saturday against Orlando. Really tough. There's a 10-day West Coast trip, and they've got 2 with the Pacers. They've got Cleveland. They've got Oklahoma City at home. They've got the Knicks at home. Off that 10-day road trip, a couple of back-to-backs with Cleveland and OKC. So we're going to see kind of where the Bucks really are, JR. Are they, you mentioned they're the 4 seed. Can they hold on to it by beating the Pacers a couple more times? Because frankly, other than the Denver win, JR, they had yet to beat any of the top 3 teams in either conference. Yeah. They were 1-11 going into that, after that game. They've lost 8 times the lottery teams. So what does that say? That means they're a middle of the pack squad. And so I think this next month is important in that way for them. But the vibes have been good all year, even when they were 2-8, even when, they hit that 3-7 stretch when Bobby Portis was home right before. And then during the All-Star break, they figured out how to play without Bobby a little bit here through his suspension. Having Giannis back helps, of course. But yeah, they feel good. They feel confident. But again, I think a truer measure of what kind of team they are, is going to come in the next couple weeks.
Hey, you mentioned that clunker loss to the Houston Rockets. I mean, they didn't score at all in the fourth quarter, but they also didn't give up any points in the fourth quarter. It was 15-12, and that ultimately was the deciding factor. I thought really good defense in that game. Could very easily be a 9-game winning streak. And you mentioned the Magic game coming up on Saturday. These are the teams that they're going to see in the playoffs. The Magic, the Cavaliers, the Pacers. Those may not be, what you think of as the very best, although Cleveland certainly is very best teams in the NBA. But those are teams that they're gonna face. They got to beat those teams. Giannis clearing 20,000 points. Like I said, I want to start there. What that means to him? What do you think it means to him? Because it's one of those things we all saw, we knew was coming. He said he expects to score another 10,000 points at the very least, and I don't know why anyone would think think otherwise. He certainly seems capable of it, having just turned 30 years old. But where does this fall in terms of the achievements that he has in his, on his resume that he feels strongest about? And then your perspective, how big of a deal is it to hit this milestone? Like it's certainly, there's still some names here that aren't like the best of the best in NBA history, but it is obviously a very notable round number. How do you regard it? How does Giannis regard it?
Yeah. I mean, he was already, a walking Hall of Famer, before this. There's only a handful of guys who are not in the Hall of Fame who have hit 20,000. So it is an exclusive club. You're talking about 52 players out of, the history of the game. And Giannis, what's interesting, JR, is I think there's two things. One, he's getting older, and so he's understanding he's going to do these things and to maybe allow himself to appreciate it a little bit. So, for instance, it was a joke last night, but he wanted to watch the tribute video, and not listen to Doc Rivers call up a play. I don't know if, like, when he broke Kareem's record, JR, a couple years ago, he didn't really want to, talk about that or, I've got more to do. This was just a game. Like, I think as time has gone on, he's sort of getting a better grasp of what he's doing in a grander context. He's older now too, so I think that's part of it, right? Like you just kind of learn a little bit more. I think the fact that Dame is so willing to talk about these things, embrace these things, talk about, frankly, how great he is at times. Like Dame hit 20,000 last year in this Bucks locker room, right? And so that's a lot. It's a roundabout way to say I think he enjoyed this one, appreciated it, took the time. Again, this is a small thing. It's kind of inside baseball to maybe show where he's grown here, JR. Typically, Giannis goes through a pretty protracted post game. He sees his family, he lifts weights, then he showers, then he dresses, and sometimes we are there till midnight after a game. In this particular instance, he said goodnight to his family, and then he came right to do media for about 20 minutes, and answered all the questions about this. Very thoughtful, retrospective answers, as we know Giannis can be. Again, I think just a little different in understanding the moment, his place in history, what it means. I think, JR, what it shows is clearly he's one of the greatest scorers in NBA history, which is pretty remarkable if you think that he scored 537 points as a rookie. Yeah. Only like 5 guys scored fewer in their rookie years. Usually you look at that list, start with LeBron James. I mean, these guys are coming in either rookies of the year, scoring 2,000 points, 1,800 points, and they're kind of off and running. I mean, he really didn't hit a stride until his 3rd season, JR. And so he's doing this sort of in a delayed way, if you will. And yet has hit like hyperspeed. I think he's the 6th youngest by age to do this, 26th fastest in terms of games played. So kind of right in the mark there of like guys who, look, if he stays healthy, he said he wants to get to 30. Hakeem Olajuwon told me, he'd get to 30. So that's that's like sort of a next tier of great scorers, because that's an even smaller list, obviously. I think Kevin Durant just got there and he's 8th or 9th, something like that. So
he is 8th. Yep.
Yeah. So, that's, and it's interesting, JR, because Giannis misses games. That's also what's fascinating about this. Like he doesn't, last year he played 71, which is the most he had played in like 5-6 years. He does this in a relatively short amount of time as well. So to me, I think it's just it just shows how dominant of a player he has been. And yeah, 20K. Look, JR, it's like football yards. I don't think anybody knows what the number is. They just know it's a lot. And so when you hit like 20, it's a nice sort of way to recognize it. And then I think from now you kind of go by 5s, maybe. 25 is a lot, maybe 22, something like that. So like you hit these kind of numbers the rest of the way. It's you're just sort of climbing up a list. But yeah, it was a pretty remarkable accomplishment for him. And as he said, kind of at the end of it, to do it all in a Bucks uniform is also pretty special.
Yeah, by the time he gets to 25, there will be more than 25 players who have reached that mark. But right now, like Steph Curry is about to get to 25. I mean, that's kind of the level we're talking about. If you count ABA stats, only 9 players have hit 30,000. That includes Julius Erving, who is not then part of the just strict NBA numbers, where Kevin Durant is the 8th and final 30,000 point scorer at this point. That would be an amazing achievement. Part of his story lately is this jump shot, is this mid-range game that you wrote a lot about. An incredible piece at jsonline.com looking at the evolution of his mid-range game. The story with Giannis has always been, as these years have gone on, well, just wait till he can shoot, wait till he can hit a three-pointer, or wait till he expands his game, look out. And, Giannis has always been very invested in getting better, getting stronger. And I think that's been borne out. Like, even into his 30s, we are seeing, I think, defensively the best version of Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know if it gets better from here. I don't know if it can. But certainly seeing that evolution of the mid-range game suggests that, yeah, there's still actual room for him to get better. And the MVP discussion is kind of separate from that. But I guess I wonder if you think my premise is correct, that this is in fact the best Giannis we've had. And I wonder if you think there is room for even more, how much the mid-range game ties into that, what is left to unlock in his game, if anything. How do you see the evolution here of Mr. Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Yeah, it's interesting because for him, he believes there's more. That's sort of a nebulous word for him. I think clearly, though, this mid-range jumper has been part of it. He's been working on it. I think it was 3 years ago, JR, maybe. He was pretty effective in the mid-range. He didn't shoot it a ton, but he made like 40%, something like that. Kind of went away again. And Doc Rivers has him playing in a different place, the elbows, which has sort of opened things up for him and teammates. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it was for years, JR, right? Like, he was, the newest of dominant interior players. And it was, if he could just shoot, he could extend his career. He won't get as hurt. What can this do for him? And he's finally doing it, and really good, JR. Like, heading into March, he was, you're talking Kevin Durant, DeMar DeRozan, Devin Booker, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, those are the guys who are like better than him in shooting the mid-range jump shot, which is pretty remarkable because, like, that's what those guys do and have done. And for him, it's creating a little more space. These guys have to come out and respect it now. He still has that elite first step. He can get to the rim in a step. There's some playmaking aspects there too for teammates. And he said, look, in the piece, he's like, the knee surgery a couple of years ago scared him a little bit. Couldn't walk for a couple of days. Couldn't do anything for a couple months. The calf injury last year knocked him out of the playoffs, scared him a little bit, where he's like, all right, like, if I get hurt, or if I can't do the things I've done, what else can I do here to play 20 years is his goal, to still be a great player, which is a goal. So it's this part of it. He's been working on it for years, Jeff. This is not an overnight thing. We know this, right? This is 5-6 years of trying this. It just kind of took, I think the Olympics helped, to knock down sort of pressure shots and really look, man, I mean, as Americans, Game 6 and NBA Finals, I can't imagine the pressure of carrying a country in the Olympic Games. My guess is that is a more weighty feel, and he had to make jump shots to win those games, and did it, right? So that's this evolution of it. I think what more is, JR, it's free throws. That's I think what's next. It may not be a sexy level, but let's be honest, man. Like, if this dude was making 70% of his 3-pointers or free throws the last 5 years, he's already at what, 1,000? He would have done this a while ago. So, and I think there's still once we get to the playoff share, teams still want him to shoot free throws at the end of games.
Yep.
Game 6, Bucks fans, it's an all-time performance, but it's a one-time performance. So I
That's
think
right.
Teams are still going to do that. They're not going to want Damian Lillard to handle the ball late in games, right? They're going to want to put Giannis on the line. So I think going forward, this confidence in the jumper and the form that he's using will translate to the free throw line. I think for him, 70% is probably not acceptable because it's still not like very good. But considering where he is and where he's been, that's probably a start and moving up, JR. So I think that would be the next level. And all of a sudden now you're taking the same amount of shots, you're doing the same things, but now you're getting 3 to 4 to 5 more points per game. That's huge, and then beyond that, hard to say what he sees. I mean, he jokes. He's like, the 3-pointer at some point, I think will have to become a little more consistent and viable for him. As we're speaking, like years down the line when he's no longer the fulcrum of an offense. I think, he's seen Brook Lopez do it. So I think down the line, so it's like free throws here, there's like this level, 3-pointers like here, at some point. And then what's in between there? Maybe it's health, and that allows him to kind of do all these things. But yeah, JR, there's more there. It's just, but I think this shooting element for him was just so important because it's gonna keep him healthy. He's scoring more effectively, and where he's doing it from is opening things up for Dame and his teammates in a way that obviously is helping the Bucks win.
I love the idea of Brook Lopez as a blueprint, a guy who like literally made no threes for the first few years of his career,
Yeah.
who has almost 800 threes in his Bucks career alone. That's top number 4 in franchise history in makes, which is wild. I've kind of gathered that the mid-range is his version of that. He is developing these skills because as it gets harder for him to get to the hoop, whether because people are hacking him to death or because he's just not the player strength that he once has, he's got to get that touch. And, you mentioned the free throw thing. I think I knew in the moment that they won game 6 that people would forget that he hit 17 of 19 free throws in that game and that this was an uncommon performance in that very key way. And that was such a big component of the 50-point game. This kind of ties into the MVP thing, but I don't want to spend time on that because I think that ship has sailed. I don't think he's as good as he's played when healthy. I don't think he's going to be an MVP candidate. I think it's pretty safely going to be either Nikola Jokić or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But just in a broader context of how you think people will ultimately remember Giannis's game, like what it is that separates him from every other player who's ever played the game. Because Jokić, I think you could have a similar conversation. Like he is unlike in some ways anybody who's come before. He's changed the game in certain ways. You even mentioned changed MVP voting, if nothing else, in certain ways, and how we evaluate the game and sort of efficiency stats and things like that. I wonder if when we look back, because he played with Jokić, will it be seen as the Giannis Jokić era? Will it be seen as, Giannis changed the game and Jokić filled that spot? Or I don't know. Like, I don't think that there's a right answer here or an obvious answer here, but I wonder 10, 15 years from now, or whenever Giannis is done, what are we visualizing? What do we see and how do we evaluate what he brought to basketball that maybe we hadn't seen before?
Yeah, it's such a great talking point, and it's so interesting, JR, because I think, so how do I say this? I think Giannis, unfortunately for him, got caught in the change in the way MVP voting happens. And what I mean by that is, so he wins back-to-back, and it's immediately, well, can't win another one until he wins a title, which is an absurd line of thought. Look, I've had MVP votes. I don't understand why postseason matters because it's a regular season award, but that's how people think. So it was, all right, he's done winning MVPs for whatever reason, regardless of what he does, until he wins a title. So he checks the box in 21. It's only 2 seasons. But in those 2 seasons, Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokić had put together just ridiculous raw number, analytical number campaigns that even while Giannis was doing the best of Giannis in those seasons, winning the title and after, like these two other bigs took big man play to some other point. Joker and Embiid had the mid range in those years. They rebounded. Obviously, Joker was an assist, and then you got these efficiency models, and Giannis was the most efficient guy, 18, 19, 20, and then Jokić like obliterated that as he hit his prime. And so all of a sudden, Joker's winning MVP. Joel wins an MVP, and then those guys are all deserving of that. Then Joker wins MVPs. All of a sudden, it turns into, well, Joker is now you can win if you're a 6 seed because look at this guy with no help, and then he wins a title and yet continues to raise the bar in a way that is just unimaginable. So we spent 5 minutes talking about Giannis's mid-range. Well, Nikola Jokić is now a 44% three-point shooter. Like, what is that?
That's ridiculous.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's okay. Like, it's not a knock on Giannis to say that Nikola Jokić exists. Will Chamberlain played against Bill Russell, right? Michael Jordan played against and with Hakeem Olajuwon and some of these other guys. Like every era of basketball has like these great players. It just so happens that in Giannis's prime window, you had prime Jokić and a season of just Joel Embiid being healthy. And Joel is maybe one of the better what ifs ever, but he's a Hall of Famer and he's won scoring titles. He deserved that MVP. And what I mean by Giannis being a victim of the change in voting is I think after him, then it turned into this other thing of like, you don't really hear about how Shea's got to win a title or Jason Tatum had to win a title. Like the title thing has seemed to be like put away in a way, in some fashion. And it's all these other numbers. And what's weird is like, for as great as Giannis is, Joker's got better numbers. And in the year that Giannis led the Bucks to the number 1 overall seed, Mike Budenholzer's last year in 2023, I voted for Giannis as MVP because it was pretty simple to me. Best player on the best team. Joker was close. Embiid was close. Like whoever it was a close race. But it was like, hey, historic year, best year from this guy, number 1 seed, easy, right? And then it was like, no, all of a sudden 58 wins didn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
It was this other stuff. So I don't know, JR, he just kind of got lost. And and that's in the MVP voting. I still think people appreciate him and are acknowledging his greatness. He's doing things statistically that like either never have been done or it's Will Chamberlain. It's just that the other guys are doing that stuff. And, I think he's 30 now. I went back, Jared, and looked. The last MVP to win in his age 30 season was Steve Nash. Nash went back-to-back in 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And when he was 30 and 31, and Steve Nash was revolutionizing basketball at that time. Like, Giannis is doing great things, but right now he's not like changing the game. And so then Steve Nash, you gotta go back then to Jordan and Malone, and from 96 to 99, those were the last guys to be 30 or older. So unfortunately for Giannis, I think those days are done. Joker might win this year, might win another one. I think Joker's got the thing that just checks a lot of boxes for voters that Giannis doesn't have for whatever reason. So I could see Joker winning another one, giving him 4. I think Shea should win it this year. Best player, best team. The Thunder are just running away with things, and the Bucks just aren't winning enough. Like if the Bucks had the Cavs record right now, I think he's in the mix, but I think the time of the Bucks winning 65 games is also over, at least for the foreseeable future. So he's not going to have the wins. He's maybe only going to play 65 games. where these other guys, like Joker never misses games. Shea doesn't miss games. Like, there are going to be these things that just sort of cloud that picture for Giannis. I think all I'll say is if he's going to get back in the mix, it's going to have to be a seminal Buck season with 60 wins or 58 wins or just some sort of dominant kind of comeback. And then he's going to have to continue the offense. And he's honestly, JR, he's going to have a defensive season that's on par with 5 years ago. And it gets harder to play defense when you're older. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the chips are stacked so against him now that's probably gone. But it doesn't mean he's not going to be top 3 or top 2 or, win it. I don't know. I'm sure he'd love to prove me wrong, but I have a hard time seeing the electorate, if you will, kind of tilting things into it for a guy who's been better since his MVPs and yet still just is maybe falling further and further down the list of votes.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about something our colleague wrote, Lori Nickel, I think about a week ago, a couple stories at jsonline.com looking at just chatting with Giannis about his legacy with the Bucks. Again, questions about whether or not he would pursue opportunities elsewhere. Again, I think he entertains them in the best way. Like, he loves it here. He's loyal to this place. He acknowledges that he didn't know any better when he started here. And so therefore Milwaukee maybe caught a break because he didn't have exposure to some of the other cities that were out there. But this is his home and he wouldn't leave unless it's abundantly clear that the Bucks can't win a title. And it would almost be a mutual decision at that point. I don't know if there's any takeaways that you think reframe the conversation or offer something that caused you to raise your eyebrows particularly, but give me a sense of what you took away from Lori's conversations with him. They were so good. These stories are so good.
Yeah, it's definitely. He's very thoughtful about legacy and what it means to be a player with one team. It's kind of funny. He said Milwaukee got lucky because I didn't know any better. I had a conversation with him once where he even said, he's like, look, if I had been drafted by Chicago, maybe I'm not this person, like being in a different city where he was in his life and developmentally as a person, who knows, right? If he's in some other place, it's, so he's thought about that. But with that though, yes, Milwaukee got lucky. They were also smart enough to draft him. So whatever, I guess. Yeah. But I think a key part of that was something that we as Americans and specifically American basketball media don't understand. He said, look, international players, we get drafted wherever we get drafted, that's home. Like this is like Milwaukee's a second home. He goes home in the summer. Like NBA cities are a place to work, a place to visit. Like he makes all the money. He has all the endorsements. Like that doesn't matter. This is not 1995. It's hard to explain this for an American. Like for a basketball player that is there to work, there is no difference between the 4 seasons in LA, Chicago. No, we're not one in Memphis, Cleveland, whatever. The Ritz, the 4 seasons that these guys stay in, there's no difference. They're all the same. That's why they stay there. They're 5-star hotels. Giannis kind of went viral for what he said when they were stuck in New Orleans. He's like, it's not that hard of life. We're in the hotel for 4 days, right? Charter planes, charter buses, prepared meals. Like that's literally what they do. And so, and yeah, some guys go out into the city. We hear about that in Milwaukee all the time, right? Oh, there's no nightlife. Well, a lot of guys, it's just the job. And there is no nightlife because they fly in, they go to bed, they wake up, they shoot around, they take a nap, eat some prepared meals in the hotel, go to the arena, leave. And international players, again, JR, like maybe they have homes in different places for whatever reasons, but they don't live here. Like Nikola Jokić Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, they go home. Like, we don't see them unless then they're playing for their country in a summer competition, right? And so I think that was interesting. And the reason I kind of wanted to really explain that, like, he had said this. He's like, I can't see raising my kids in LA or Chicago or whatever, because like he can walk around Milwaukee in a way that people leave him alone. Chris Middleton said this year in his sort of farewell piece talking to me a few weeks ago. He's like, I'm just a guy coming to the grocery store in Milwaukee. It's different in other places. And Giannis has been around enough to see that. So much so we're in LA and there were about 25 people in the visitors' locker room in the into a dome, and they all like shouted at once at him at a question. He was like, it just like took him aback. Like, that's not his vibe. He's like, LA's not for me, man. Like, he said that like on camera.
He said that a couple times. Yeah.
And so I think that's important to know that like it's not about market. And so let's circle back to the Bucks winning. We haven't gotten to this conversation with him yet. I'm curious how he views Adam Silver's NBA right now, JR. Parity of opportunity. The Bucks are one of 7 different teams to win a championship, right? Since 18-19. You know, it's or the year before. The league has changed itself to avoid to crush dynasties, to crush consistent winning. You posted this over at Blue Sky with the Kyrie Irving injury, JR, about like teams that went all in and what all in means. And it's turning into like 1 or 2 year windows. This is the 7th straight year that the Bucks have had a chance, you could say, could get to a final. Like, that's so rare. And so I'm curious going forward, JR, like the chance to win. I don't know. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? I don't even know if he knows what that looks like as time goes on. So, yeah, he's thought about like that. I don't think he wants to be part of like a massive rebuild. But what's interesting about that, JR, is in the Bucks' pursuit of the 7 years or more of competitive play, they've traded all their draft picks. Like, the Bucks can't tank until 2032. Right. So in reality, like, the Bucks are going to be one of the teams that are always trying to win. So, you know, and they still can pay him the most money. So, yeah, but I definitely encourage people to kind of look up, you know, Giannis's legacy at jsonline.com, Lori Nichols. And yeah, of course he says he has thought about finishing his career elsewhere. Like, how can you not? You're talking about what, 3 guys, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, Dirk Nowitzki. You know, that's not a lot, JR. That's not. So, you know, the odds are very, very, very small. I think he just acknowledges that. And I think it's just an insightful conversation into how he thinks about these things. And then Lori, of course, in her own unique way, applies it to the departures of Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Braun, Craig Counsell, and just how Milwaukee and Wisconsin has had sort of a bad run of these great players or manager, I guess, to leave, and the way that they've left. And Giannis definitely doesn't want to be a part of any of those type of situations. But I think he also understands maybe some of that's a little out of his control. But, you know, it was really fascinating to see him like think about that and articulate it in a way that wasn't like immediate aggregation on Giannis's plotting his exit, because that's not what it was about.
No. He is Jim Owczarski. Everything he has is at jsonline.com. Again, the Bucks are back in action on Saturday. Some big time battles coming up against foes in the Eastern Conference playoff hunt. So that should be pretty good. Any last thoughts, Jim, before I send you away?
Yeah, I think this stretch run, as I kind of said at the start, JR reiterated, this month is a big month. Obviously, games played wise, it's big, but we're just going to see what this team's about. And Doc has really leaned into the Dame Giannis 2-man game since the All-Star break. They very rarely play without one another now. It's stark contrast to earlier in the year. Dame gets a couple minutes of his own at the end of the first quarter, I believe, maybe end of third, and it's really been working. You mentioned, the clunker in Houston where the bench didn't score for 6 minutes. The bench has been uneven. Kevin Porter Jr. is shooting like 55% from the mid-range. I don't know how sustainable that is as an offensive system with no Dame or Giannis on the court. But it's kind of working right now. I'll venture to say it's not going to work against Orlando or Cleveland or the Lakers or OKC. So we'll find out, though, if it does. So, yeah, I think some of these are interesting kind of in-game stuff, JR. Curious to see how long Doc kind of rides with that with 21 games left, or if he decides to start tweaking things, sort of looking toward the postseason.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Point Forward podcast. We'll be back again next week. Jim, thank you for joining me, and I'll talk to you again very soon.
See you.